Even though it is a flawed game, Kuon certainly wormed its way into my mind hole. Little in-joke there for Kuon fans. The characters, the story, the setting, the visuals, the art and sound design, the atmosphere, everything is top-notch. Aside from some wonkiness related to combat and the different difficulty modes, this is a game that could stand tall with the classics of the survival horror genre. However, like most of FromSoftware's early library, it got mediocre reviews, had few copies printed, and still didn't sell all that well, which is a huge shame. Kuon is set in Japan's ancient Heian period and concerns the demon-infested Fujiwara Manor and a bizarre ritual involving silkworms, mulberry trees, wicker chests, dead bodies, both human and otherwise, and a rivalry between the leaders of two demon-hunting factions. So today, let's explore FromSoftware's flawed survival horror masterpiece, Kuon. Kuon was released by FromSoftware in 2004 for the PlayStation 2. It came out during what could arguably be considered the tail end of the survival horror boom in the gaming market that happened in the late 90s and early 2000s, before Resident Evil 4 came along and changed the course of the horror genre for a few years. Before we dive further into Kuon, I want to thank these dungeon dwellers who support me on Patreon, and now through YouTube memberships as well. So if you'd like to be one of the fine folks who gets to watch videos early, along with other perks, become a dungeon dweller. Join us. More details on how to do that at the end of the video. Right from the title screen, Kuon hits you with its special brand of creepy vibes. You hear this childish singing, and the art here changes between 3 different backgrounds each time you turn on the game, but they all have this blinking eye animation that's just so unsettling.
Oh my god!
I've used this Mr. Plinkett meme way too much recently. The menu song here also has translations available online, and as you might expect, the lyrics are incredibly disturbing. The first line, where it repeats Hashizoro-e, refers to a ritual where a baby who has grown its teeth is fed its first meal, and as we'll come to see, eating after some kind of transformation is a central element to Kuon's narrative. I won't go through all of the lyrics, but there's a lot of inversions of innocent-sounding things, again lining up with the nursery rhyme style melody of the song, and a lot of lines that refer to specific parts of Kuon's story. Very creepy. In Kuon, you choose between 2 playable characters at the outset, with a third unlocking after you beat the game with the first 2, but we'll save that one for the spoiler section. Initially, there's Utsuki, the daughter of a powerful Onmyoji named Doman. The English translation refers to the Onmyoji as astrologers, or exorcists, but the more literal translation is a yin and yang master. Onmyoji were actually a real class of people in ancient Japan. During the Heian period, from roughly the years 794 to 1185, they held a powerful position in society, similar to the samurai of the later eras of Japanese history. As I mentioned in my Cosmology of Kyoto video, a game that also takes place during the same time period as Kuon, link in the description if you haven't seen it, Japan was a very superstitious place during the Heian period, and the Onmyoji were specialists who were in charge of tasks such as maintaining the accuracy of calendars, as well as warding off evil spirits and performing divinations. In Kuon, many of the characters are Onmyoji. Speaking of which, the second character, Sakuya, is a disciple of Doman, Utsuki's father, and an Onmyoji in training. Further keeping with the Onmyoji original meaning, Utsuki represents the yin phase of the story, and Sakuya represents the yang phase. You can choose either character from the outset, but unlike, say, Resident Evil 2, there's no A or B scenario for the characters. They stay the same no matter which you choose first. Still, I feel like Utsuki's scenario is the best one to start with. It feels like the introduction, and Sakuya is where the real story begins. Utsuki's side is also a bit easier, and sets up a lot of central mysteries that receive answers in Sakuya's scenario, though there are elements and other events that will only make sense once you've completed both character sides of the story. It's honestly really well done, and I'll get more into the nitty-gritty of the story later. After you choose your character, you actually get a difficulty selection. Who says FromSoft doesn't know how to do modal difficulty? Well, actually, I'll also get more into the weirdness of these settings when we get around to talking about the combat. There's a lot of overlap between the 2 characters' scenarios, but there's also points where things diverge, and you'll visit places and collect items in slightly different orders. And in Sakuya's case, you'll go to an entirely separate area with its own special enemies and boss. Utsuki only fights 2 bosses, but Sakuya fights 4. She also has this half-baked Mr. X mechanic where you sort of get chased by an evil spirit, but only on certain screens, and it's not really much of a threat. Anyway, I appreciated the differences nonetheless. The opening cutscene shows Lord Fujiwara being awakened in the middle of the night by some kind of disturbance. He goes off to investigate and is freaked out by a bunch of bugs crawling from one of the walls. As he tries to compose himself, he's attacked and killed by a dark-haired woman who drags his dead body to a room with some twins playing together by candlelight. Aw. The twins then help the woman fold up Fujiwara's dead body and stuff it into a wicker chest. Aw. The woman enters the chest herself, and the twins close the lid after her. There's no explanation for any of this right now, but as we explore the manor and beyond, with both Utsuki and Sakuya, everything that's going on here will become clearer. At the outset of Utsuki's scenario, we read a letter from her father, Domon, who informs her that he's been summoned by Lord Fujiwara. The Fujiwara Manor is actually close to Domon's home, just a short hike down a mountain path. Lord Fujiwara thinks his manor is cursed, and Domon believes Fujiwara is a big old scaredy cat who saw some rats and mistook them for demons. Domon tells Utsuki to look after the shrine while he's away, and not to forget to take care of the silkworms. He's also worried about Utsuki's older sister, Kureha, as she's been feeling unwell. Clearly, Domon ends up being away for far longer than Utsuki or her sister anticipated, and they head to the manor together to investigate. They find a silk seal woven onto the gate at one of the entrances, which is a bit strange. So, Utsuki uses the sacred cloth she has with her, she is a shrine maiden after all, to open the gate and gets a weird feeling about the place. You don't say. But Kureha, in her creepy monotone, says there's nothing to worry about and urges Utsuki to enter with her. I'll just take a time out here to say that I played the game with Japanese voices, but you can also play it in English if you're into that sort of thing.
Korea!
Oh, my sister Korea! Anyway, shortly after entering the manor grounds, the two sisters hear the same singing that we heard on the title screen. Kureha has a coughing fit and says that she'll go to investigate the singing by herself, and that Utsuki should wait here. It's always a good plan to separate when you're investigating a demon-infested manor. As soon as we gain control of Utsuki, we see a dead body on this circular garden path, and some creep giggling, circling around the path opposite us. It's all good. As we explore further down the garden path, we experience our first tempest, which is a concentration of negative energy that emanates as a sort of psychic blast, which knocks your character back, and usually some other supernatural event will occur. As a gameplay mechanic though, it's meant to keep you from running everywhere. You can hold the circle button to run, but if you're running when a tempest happens, you'll take a large hit to your health, which will put you in a state called vertigo. You can also be put into this state by taking too much damage from enemies. You can keep track of your health on the menu screen, but you'll also get different animations from the characters when they're in weakened states. When vertigo happens, the screen turns blurry, and one hit from an enemy will kill you, unless you use a healing item or press the R1 button to meditate. Meditation is a mechanic that allows you to heal to full at any time, but the more damage you've taken, the longer it will take to recover. So you need to make sure there are no enemies around so you have time to meditate properly. It's a cool mechanic actually, and it also makes the game overall pretty forgiving, unusual for a FromSoftware game. Still, it fits in with the background of the playable characters and their spiritual natures. This tempest that Utsuki's experienced has knocked over a stone pillar, blocking her path, because knee-high obstacles are the bane of video game characters everywhere. On the other side of the rubble, we catch a glimpse of Kureha walking off into the darkness by herself, so Utsuki heads off to investigate the manor on her own. At around the same time, in the Yang phase of the story, Sakuya arrives at the manor with a trio of other onmyoji, all disciples of Domon, who have been called to the manor by their master. These include Sakuya's older brother, Doryo, Dokai, the eldest of Domon's disciples, and Dochin, the youngest and most inexperienced of the bunch. If you noticed, all of the disciples' names, except for Sakuya, start with Do, which when written in kanji means the way or the path. Neat. The group talks about how it's been a month since Lord Fujiwara has disappeared, and Sakuya has a memory of talking to Domon about the incident at the manor before he left to investigate. Sakuya knows that the demons who have infested the grounds cannot be exorcised, but Domon tells her to basically grow a pair, because she's his student and not a disciple of the incompetent Abe no Seimei, who we'll learn more about much later. Dochin shakes Sakuya from her daydream and tells her that Dokai and Doryo have already entered the manor, so Sakuya heads off after Dochin and begins her own investigation. Gameplay is mainly exploration-based, finding items for healing and key items needed to progress and solve simple puzzles. Doors in the manor are locked by seals, like the one seen in the cutscene with Utsuki and Kureha, but the seals increase in strength throughout the playthrough, represented by different planets. You'll find more sacred cloths, like the one Utsuki starts with, so you can unlock more portions of the manor and other areas of the game. You also get maps of most areas that can be brought up at any time by pressing the L1 button. For combat, each character has a short-range melee weapon, along along with access to consumable spell cards. And I'll get much deeper into how combat works later. Saving your game is done near bodies of water, marked by piles of sacred stones, and is known as the cleansing ritual. Saving is also limited by a consumable item, like the ink ribbons from Resident Evil. In Kuon, you use vessels, these little paper boats that have candles on them. Luckily, they're way more plentiful than ink ribbons in an RE game, so I never came close to running out of them. When you save, you float the boat down the body of water, and you can watch it. There it goes. Bye, little boat. I love you. So those are the basics of the gameplay, very similar to other survival horror games of the time. Like Silent Hill, Kuon makes great use of not only static camera angles, but also moving camera shots that really play with your expectations. There's some great moments like walking down this dark hallway, only to be hit by a tempest and having the camera angle switch, showing this creep walking off in the foreground, with you now in the background. Or this late game moment when you have to crouch to enter a shrine area, and you don't know what you're moving toward, and it's just so delightfully claustrophobic. It also uses quite a few jump scares. But these peter off and are replaced by just the tension of a great horror atmosphere later on. Getting back to the two scenarios and the story structure a bit, I said earlier that the Onmyoji team arrive around the same time as Utsuki and her sister. This is because the order of events can be a bit difficult to place at times. There are some moments that lead you to believe Sakuya's scenario takes place first. Like, about halfway through, you'll catch up with Dochin again, and he'll throw down a rope that he actually tied to a dead body to allow Sakuya to climb up from an underground area. And in the beginning of Utsuki's scenario, you see that rope tied around the dead body. But then, Utsuki visits a pavilion a little later on in her scenario and ends up falling through the floor. Yet, Sakuya explores that same pavilion, and it's one of the first places you'll visit in her side of the story, but the hole is already there. There's also some other things that both characters experience, like both of them witnessing the Princess Ayako running into her room and locking the door, both of them needing to find a bell to let her out, and both of them then seeing the princess dragged off by an evil spirit. You could chalk this up to the fact that it's just a video game, but there are some other interesting theories that could explain these overlapping situations and the incongruity of the timeline, which I'll get into in the spoiler section later. Anyway, the interior of the Fujiwara Manor is a mess. There's only a couple of people who are still alive by the time the Onmyoji team or Utsuki and her sister arrive at the place. The hallways and floors are littered with dead bodies and blood trails. There are ghosts and other demons running around, and evidence of something even more horrible that went down before they all arrived. Darkness, of course, is ever present throughout the game, and while the lighting effects here are not really much to write home about, Silent Hill 2 had more impressive shadows and the like, Kuon's softer approach with the use of torches and candlelight is still effective, and each character carries a light source with them at all times by default. Utsuki has a little candle on a string that never goes out, and Sakuya has a lantern. Attention to detail in both gameplay and environment has been a design principle of FromSoftware since their early days. I think people sometimes get wrapped up in the Hidetaka Miyazaki era of From and attribute a lot of things like environmental storytelling, complex mechanics, difficulty, and satisfying level design to him alone. And while it's clear Miyazaki is excellent at all of those things and has a really imaginative mind and is a great director, those things I mentioned are just pillars of FromSoftware's design philosophy since the early Kingsfield games. Miyazaki and his team have just elevated them to new heights with what they've created over the years. I say all this just because Kuon has all of these things as well. Unlocking shortcuts and new paths through the manor and other areas of the game feels satisfying. I also really like that the manor is very open, in typical Japanese architectural style, with lots of outdoor walkways and courtyards between rooms. It makes for a unique setting among survival horror games of the era. And all the nature that you'll encounter, from rock gardens to flowing springs to forest paths, the natural beauty of your surroundings is offset by these horrifying demons and the foreboding atmosphere. And again, that attention to detail. In Utsuki's scenario, you'll see dead bodies on the ground, and when you pass through the same area again, you'll see that the bodies have moved and only a blood trail leading to the water is left. You find out in Sakuya's scenario what's been happening to all these bodies. There's also a part of the manor where there are just these giant gashes in the wall, like a huge demon slashed at it with its claws. Some notes left by servants and others in the manor talk of giant creatures that attacked. It's great foreshadowing for later on, that you could completely miss if the game wasn't so focused on keeping you creeping slowly through it. I mentioned the tempests that cause damage to you if you're running, but the enemies can also hear you. and will move to your position if you run, whereas if you were walking, you could have avoided them entirely. There are also various trays, candle stands, and partitions around that can be bumped into or knocked over when running, which will alert enemies and even summon ghosts that would have otherwise not been there at all. Also, running for too long will cause you to get fatigued, which will damage you, so you'll either need to use your finite healing items or stop and meditate to recover. The game does everything in its power to keep you moving slowly and studying your environment, and because of this slow burn design, the dense atmosphere and the horror of your surroundings can really play on your nerves. This is also helped by the sound design. Playing Kuon with headphones is highly recommended. There's a lot of multi-directional sound put to use here. It's not perfect, not like the Thief series or anything, where you can hear how far away a guard is just by listening through a door, but I found myself impressed pretty often by how well they balance the audio and sound effects. There were also some ghostly audio phenomena, like this early scene when you're walking toward the pavilion that I mentioned earlier. It was a place preserved for parties. You hear the sound of revelry in the night, people laughing, instruments being played, glasses clinking. But when you arrive, the place is a massacre, with dead bodies and evil spirits roaming the area. The music in Kuon is mostly low drones and other sound effects that will make you wonder whether it was part of the soundtrack or an enemy stalking somewhere around you. You'll also often hear the sound of running water as a stream flows through the manor, as well as crickets in the distance. These natural sounds mixed in with the unnatural ambience of the background tracks make for a disturbing soundscape. Enemies themselves are usually accompanied by the sound of a heartbeat, along with discordant strings, which adds a lot of tension to the fights. And when you're damaged, you'll hear a pounding heartbeat sound as well. However, I will say, the enemy designs aren't all that impressive. Some of the bosses are good, but the normal enemies are very similar. Ghosts are the weakest, but appear infrequently, especially if you aren't running. They also only swipe at you, and only take one hit to defeat. The Gaki, these little squat demon children, are the most common enemy. They can perform a swipe attack or a grab, and they're not too much of a threat, even when you encounter two of them at the same time, mostly because they get in each other's way in the cramped spaces where you fight multiples of them. The Yamibito are a step up, dead servants of the manor, surrounded by an evil purple aura. They're a bit stronger and sturdier than the Gaki, but attack in the same way by either swiping at you or grabbing. Again, I don't think you ever face more than two of them at a time, and they're pretty slow moving, so you can usually avoid getting ganged up on. Then there are the Mizuhiki, crawling fishmen. They attack in groups and have a splashing projectile attack, but they also move slowly, and you'll almost always have a lot of space to fight them. Enryo are these blobs of flesh that crawl. They only appear once or twice. They're quite strong and difficult to hit with melee attacks. Getting out of range and blasting them with fire magic is easy to do though. Adamushi are giant silkworms that have human faces that you'll fight in the cave areas near the end of the game. Like the other two enemies I just mentioned, they also crawl on the ground, but are much faster. These can be a threat, and there are a couple points where you'll face two of them at a time. They have one critical weakness to a certain summon card that makes them a complete joke to fight though. Then there are the Mashira, giant monkeys that only appear in Sakuya's scenario. These are also pretty strong, and can be a big threat. You'll need to constantly be on the move, and you'll want to use your stronger magic spells and summons to deal with them. And that's it for the regular enemies. Honestly, the Gaki and Yamibito are the most common, so you'll be fighting those the most. But let's finally get around to talking about how combat works, because it's got some good ideas, but its execution is unfortunately Kuon's biggest stumble. Each character gets a different short-range melee weapon, and these get upgraded to ice and fire versions later on in the game. Although you get the fire ones so late that it almost doesn't even matter. By that point you'll be using spells against most enemies. The spell cards are Kuon's best combat feature. You get varying intensities of elemental projectiles based on fire and ice. But you also get summon cards. These range from little spider buddies, a wolf pupper, a creepy puppet lady, and even a big old demon boy. They have their own health, represented by bloodstains appearing on the card after you summon them. Even without taking damage, they only stick around for a short period of time, and this time seems to be even shorter when outside of combat, so summoning them before battles is a bit of a waste. You can equip 2 spell cards at once to the square and triangle buttons, so you can have a projectile spell in one slot and a summon in the other, but doing this makes it so you don't have access to your melee weapon. I'd recommend leaving one slot open most of the time, and then when you reach a tougher enemy or boss, slot in a summon card to help you out. Now, I really want to dig into the combat, because while it has all these cool features, it's probably the game's biggest weakness, because of the way combat is paced. Kuon is already a slow burn, and like I mentioned, that's a good thing, but when you enter combat with normal enemies, it goes from slow to a full stop. Let me explain. First off, we'll look at melee combat. Utsuki has a dagger, or a tanto if you want to be hyper-specific about it, a short Japanese-style curved blade, and Sakuya has a fan. Both characters can perform a 2-hit combo with their weapons. With Utsuki, you can kind of just mash the attack button and she'll do a sideways slash and then a downward thrust. With Sakuya though, you need to time your second button press. There's a short window near the end of the animation of her first attack where you can hit the button again to pull off the second hit, so it takes a bit of getting used to. Still, nothing too complicated. As I mentioned earlier, the basic enemies that you fight in the first half of the game are the Gaki and Yamibito. The Yamibito are a bit stronger, but both of the enemies have the same attack patterns. They'll do a swipe if you're slightly far away or off to the side, and they'll grab you if you're up close and right in front of them. Most of the time, this is where you'll be during melee encounters. The grab attack isn't an issue though, because as you're told by a survival scroll early in the game, you can struggle against enemies to get them off of you. What this means is you can mash attack and push enemies away. Doing this also negates all damage, so the grab attacks aren't a threat to your health at all if you just mash buttons when they happen. Sounds good, right? In theory, yes. The problem is, the enemies in Kuon are really spongy, and that just ends up making most of the fights feel really repetitive. And, oh yeah, even though Sakuya is supposed to be a semi-trained onmyoji used to dealing with demons and evil spirits, she actually sucks at fighting Gaki. If you time the second hit of her combo correctly, that second hit will, 99% of the time, completely whiff a Gaki. And it's because the first hit will knock them back a bit, and her second attack is this little twirling diagonal slash that has no further reach than the first. Utsuki's second attack, her downward thrust, actually has some forward motion, so it's not an issue. And just as a further note, this isn't the case against Yamibito, because they don't get knocked back as much, so Sakuya's combo attack is fine to use against them. Anyway, now because of the extremely short range of the melee attacks, you might whiff a few, even with Utsuki. Now, of course, yeah, you can run from enemies, but you're going to be backtracking through these areas. It's a survival horror game after all. Puzzles to solve, items to collect, you know the drill. The backtracking in Kuon isn't as bad as some games, but it's still there. Also, you have a lot of things in your arsenal to deal with enemies, so it really feels like combat is a big focus here. Most enemies also move a lot faster than you, and you can knock shit over and draw ghosts to your position, and so you can end up with a huge mess if you try to run. Not to mention, running too much drains your health, like I said before, and you fight a lot of enemies in tight spaces. So, yeah, I mean, unlike some survival horror games, the design of Kuon seems to want you to fight most of the enemies you encounter. And yeah, I get it, it's a survival horror game. Some of them are designed to make you feel weak and vulnerable. But look at these moves, look at these spells. Fucking Demon Boy here. So I don't think weak and vulnerable was really what they were going for here. Speaking of the spells, on normal difficulty, Agaki takes 5 low-level fireball spells to kill, and you'll probably get grabbed at least once while fighting, if you're not running away to gain more distance between lobbing off spells. Again, that just seems like a bit much for a basic enemy. And, more than just the amount of attacks it takes, it's the fact that there's no threat to your character during these fights, because if you do get grabbed, you can just mash attack and take no damage. So it's just dragging things out for no reason. You already understand that Agaki can grab you, and you can free yourself with no penalty after the first time it happens. Why does it need to happen another couple times during a single fight? You may have also noticed I mentioned normal difficulty a few times while talking about this. That's because I decided to start a new playthrough on easy to see what the differences were and if it helped the pacing of combat. Here's what I found. The results are really fucking weird. First of all, the only thing that lowering the difficulty does is reduce the number of attacks it takes to kill enemies. The enemies still do the same amount of damage to you, but when fighting the Gaki, you only get grabbed once during the fights, and it makes things feel like less of a slog. Same with the other enemies too, the individual fights just take up less of your time, and it feels way better, pacing-wise. Now you might be thinking, what about the resources? Dropping the difficulty must give you more spell cards and healing items. Well, this is where it gets strange. From what I played of easy, I think you do get a couple more healing items items here and there, and in some places you get more low-level spell cards, but you don't get as many of the more powerful spells or summon cards. It's really weird. For example, when you're playing as Utsuki and you first meet Sakuya, on normal she gives you 10 Hibari spell cards, which is the low-level fireballs, 10 Sutegumo summon cards, which are your little spider buddies, and 2 Saiga summon cards, the wolf pupper. But on easy, she doesn't give you any of the Sutegumo summons. And there are also several places in both character scenarios where on easy, low-level spell cards will replace where high-level or summon spell cards are found. And I mean, it's not an issue because late enemies and bosses take less hits to kill, but it's just bizarre. And then you'll run into some other wonky situations. Like playing through Sakuya's scenario on easy, you don't get any of this one summon card called Tsuchijogo, which is this trap-like summon you can lay on the ground. And when enemies walk over it, they get pulled into the ground by a bunch of hands. It's really sweet. And it's a one-hit kill card that makes dealing with the Adamushi enemies near the end of the game a cakewalk on normal. Got 2 of them at once here with Utsuki. But yeah, on easy, you don't get any of these cards with Sakuya. You do on normal, so it actually makes this part of the playthrough a little bit harder on easy. So, I don't know, yeah, the difficulty settings are just a bit off. I didn't even bother with Nightmare, the hard difficulty setting, but based on what I learned from playing easy and normal, I think hard just makes the enemies take even more hits. And yeah, I do know about the other difficulty settings you can unlock, like Insanity and also being able to set the number of hits it takes to kill enemies. And then you can also unlock a one-hit kill mode. Overall, I have to say, playing on easy fixes the pacing issues when fighting normal enemies. But the problem with easy is the bosses. They're way too much of a pushover. No threat at all. So in the end, I have to say that even though it kind of messes with the pacing of the game, playing on normal is the best way to go. But there's nothing that really finds the right balance here. So, to finally wrap up this section of the video, I'd just like to offer a couple ideas I had that I felt could possibly fix these issues. Idea number 1, probably the easiest solution, just make the enemies take less hits. Then adjust the amount of spell cards throughout the game, so you still have the tension of inventory management. And that's it. But I would also say leave the bosses the way they are on the normal setting to keep them threatening. Or, idea number 2, add in some kind of dodge mechanic. And I'm not talking about a Dark Souls style dodge roll here. I just mean some kind of backstep or something. Like for Utsuki, since she's untrained, just have her stumble backwards out of the way. Sakuya could maybe do something a bit more graceful. However, make it so you have to time the dodge, so it makes combat more active and skill-based. You can even add damage to the grabs, and maybe struggling just reduces the amount of damage you take. Then there's more risk involved. If this were the case, I wouldn't mind how many hits it takes to kill the enemies. It could stay the same as on normal, because you'd have more available to you to deal with the encounters. It's more interesting. With all of these criticisms, though, I don't think that the combat should dissuade you from playing the game. The setting, exploration, sound and art design, atmosphere, story, it's all excellent. But now, let's take a look at that story. It's very complex and has many elements that are left up to interpretation. So I'm going to be doing a pretty deep dive into it. Like I said in the beginning of the video, it really grabbed a hold of me, and I was left poring over different cutscenes, notes, and journal entries, even after 2 playthroughs. So it goes without saying, but spoilers ahead. You can skip to this time to avoid them, or use the chapter select. But anyway, let's get into it. As Utsuki explores the garden area outside of the manor, she comes across a shrine with 9 indentations for circular wooden discs. Each disc is held in place by a metal spike, but 3 discs and spikes are missing. So this is our objective for the manor portion of the scenario. Find the missing discs and spikes to open the way forward. Also in this area, Utsuki has her first encounter with the twins. These are the same 2 we saw in the opening cutscene, who helped the evil lady stuff Lord Fujiwara's body into a wicker chest. They inform Utsuki that everyone is dead, except for the Princess Ayako. Afterwards, Utsuki heads toward the mulberry tree in the garden area of the manor and encounters a young woman floating a vessel on the water nearby. Utsuki is then attacked by Agaki, but the young woman summons a wolf that fights off the demon. This young woman introduces herself as Sakuya, and we'll see her side of the story in just a bit. Sakuya says she can't help Utsuki. Spooky manor to explore, monsters to take care of, teaming up for numbers and for protection? Is this your first survival horror rodeo? But she gives Utsuki some spell and summon cards, while Utsuki hands over a sacred cloth as thanks for saving her. Utsuki can now make her way into the manor itself, and she soon encounters Princess Ayako. But the girl runs away and locks herself in her room. We'll find out from notes later that this is what her mother told her to do in case of danger, and that she should only come out when a certain bell is rung, telling her that things are safe. Around the back of the room, there's a little peephole, where Utsuki can look through to see the princess hiding. This begs the question, who's usually using this hole to spy on the princess? While Utsuki indulges in her inner peeping Tom, she also catches a glimpse of someone or something coming out from under a dresser near the opposite wall. And when she checks the hole again, Utsuki exclaims that this creature looks like her sister, Kureha. Anyway, guess we'll need to find that bell if we want any chance of rescuing the princess. As Utsuki continues to explore the manor, she uncovers notes from servants and other people who live there, and learns that some kind of disease started to spread through the household. Lady Fujiwara took it upon herself to care for the sick in the nearby temple, the one with the barricaded entrance that the twins were sitting in front of earlier. There are also some journals supposedly written by the Fujiwara's son, the prince of the manor, who is never given a name. His journals talk about a servant boy named Miyoshimaru, whom the son describes as a feeble-minded but gentle soul. Miyoshimaru gives the son some silkworm eggs, and he decides to take care of them until they hatch, after which he feeds them leaves from the mulberry tree in the garden. Silkworms, eh? Those seals on all the doors are made of silk, and some of the wicker chests that Utsuki comes across are also filled with silk. We'll definitely be coming back to this. Utsuki eventually finds her father, Domon, busy stuffing something into a wicker chest. He doesn't seem too surprised to see Utsuki here, and is more concerned with where Kureha is. He says he's got other things to take care of, and tells Utsuki to go find her sister. Soon after, Utsuki sees Kureha dragging something away down a hallway. Seeing her gives Utsuki a bout of vertigo, which, again, is caused by a buildup of negative energy. And if Utsuki checks the door that Kureha entered, she sees her silhouette inside, and it looks like she's eating something. Afterwards, Utsuki finds the bell needed to get Princess Ayako out of her room, but as soon as she reaches for it, she's attacked by the deceased and newly transformed Lord Fujiwara. After taking him, or it, out, Utsuki takes the bell, but it looks like either he's not dead yet, or something else is growing out of him. Back in Ayako's room, Utsuki rings the bell, fooling this stupid child into opening her door. Ayako talks about hearing the twins singing and seeing people infected by the mysterious disease walking around the manor at night. Yeah, we've seen them too. Ayako fears that when she hears that song, she'll be killed, or worse, abducted. I think being killed would be worse than being abducted, but then again, maybe Ayako knows something that we don't. Just then, the creepy twins enter, and well, that payoff came a lot quicker than expected. At this point, during her trips around the manor, Utsuki's managed to pick up the 3 wooden discs and metal spikes that are needed to enter the shrine. Just before entering, using the nearby save point grants a special cutscene, where Utsuki sees Kureha's reflection in the water for just a moment. We'll put a pin in that, or maybe a metal spike, and come back to it later. There's a cave system running underneath the Fujiwara Manor, and this particular passageway leads to the temple. Upon entering, we're aurally assaulted by loud chanting, which sounds very ominous. And which I at first thought was just part of the background track, but it turns out there's a high priest still alive in the temple, chanting for the sick who are still being kept there. He's been captured by silkworm threads, but still continues to attempt to comfort the sick. And that's the chanting we've been hearing this whole time, which is an interesting reversal if you think about it. The twins' song, while it has a more playful melody to it, is actually an ill omen, with some dark lyrical content. When Princess Ayako hears it, she fears she'll be killed or abducted, and then she is. Yet the priest's chanting is more evil sounding, but is actually meant to be a comfort for those who are suffering. There are no translations for his chants, unfortunately, but they're most likely ancient Buddhist mantras. And so, yeah, I don't know. I just thought the idea of this more innocent-sounding song being evil and the more ominous-sounding priest chants being good was really interesting. The priest is killed by the sick people kept in the other room, but before he dies, he says that they need corpses for their cocoons. Is he talking about the silkworms, or something else. Another interesting but unrelated piece of information. In the temple, you find the priest's journal where he writes about something awakening underneath the shrine, and he describes its howls as a mix of agony and pleasure. The priest also finds the sounds sad. You can hear these howls more clearly in the background music of this area once the priest's chanting is gone. Just another great bit of detail that shows off the care that went into crafting this game. As soon as Utsuki leaves the room, the twins' song replaces the priest's chanting, further driving home the dichotomy between these two vocal pieces. And Utsuki catches a glimpse of Kureha dragging another something down a hallway. This leads her to another underground passageway with a journal further detailing the progress of the Fujiwara sun's silkworm raising. There's nothing else left to do down here, so Utsuki returns to the temple and is hit by a tempest that rocks her so hard she falls to her knees. A rotting Kureha appears from the corner of the room, and Utsuki asks her if she needs it again before passing out. Utsuki then awakens inside a wicker chest in the underground. And this is fine, right? This underground passage is full of silk threads and dead bodies, and eventually Utsuki finds her father again. Domon explains that he's caring for the people inside the cocoons, and that unless they merge with another creature, they won't survive. The ritual of merging needs to happen 9 times, and Domon says that Utsuki should let Kureha assimilate with her, since, after all, Utsuki is the reason Kureha is dead. First we're hearing of this, and, as with most things, we'll get more context later. But yes, Kureha is dead and is performing this ritual. She's actually been dead since before the beginning of the game, and she's been finding bodies to merge with to complete her resurrection. This explains the opening cutscene, where she kills Lord Fujiwara, and her odd demeanor when she and Utsuki first arrive at the manor. Anyway, Domon's gaslighting works, and Utsuki decides to enter the wicker chest for her sister. Another interesting note here that I haven't had a chance to mention earlier, the on in Kuon is translated roughly as grudge, like the movie Ju-on. Same kanji. Ku means 9, so the title of this game could loosely be translated to 9 grudges, which is interesting because, as we'll learn later, it seems the grudges that people hold become increasingly harder for the merged beings to control as they continue through the cycles of resurrection. As Utsuki wanders deeper into the caverns, she hears the voices of her and her sister arguing. Then she finds a crack in a wall to peer through. Putting her peeping skills to use once again, she looks through and witnesses her own body being thrown on top of a wicker chest. And looking up, she sees Kureha standing on a cliff above. So right about now, you might be thinking, what? And yeah, things are getting a bit surreal. I want to get around to talking about all of this, but I think it's best to just get through the whole story first, and then come back to these individual moments. So let's set our confusion aside for now, and follow this tangled silkworm thread to the end, shall we? Utsuki runs into the twins, who take her to a room with many wicker chests, where she inspects her own dead body. The twins tell her that if she wants a new life, she should enter the wicker chest, and also that entering a cocoon will return her to where she was. So she places her own body in another wicker chest, and wonders aloud what the people inside the cocoons are thinking about. The twins respond that inside the cocoons, 2 will merge into 1, and dream a long, long dream. At this point, Utsuki sees her reflection in the bloody waters below as that of her sister, Kureha. She then wakes up near a waterfall, with a trail of blood leading from a wicker chest. This place is actually on the grounds of the shrine where Utsuki, Kureha, and Domon live. So, in a sense, Utsuki really has returned to where she came from. She heads back home and explores, where she finds her childhood diary. There are entries about praying to the mulberry tree to find the pieces of her Suguroku game, a traditional Japanese board game, sort of like backgammon. Despite all of her praying, child Utsuki is never able to find her Suguroku pieces, and she writes that the mulberry trees are malicious. One other thing here, there's another mulberry tree on the grounds of the shrine where Utsuki and Kureha live, identical to the one in the Fujiwara Manor garden, almost like they're twins. Also, fun fact, you can find the Suguroku pieces elsewhere in the house as Utsuki, and while playing as Sakuya, you can find the board. After that, you can play Suguroku from the main menu. Neat. Further explorations of her home turn up a book written by Domon that details his investigation into the silkworms that are worshipped at the shrine. He believes the parent silkworms are incarnations of the two mulberry trees, and that the silkworms have magical powers that can bring back the dead, but in order to do so, they need to feed on humans. Domon hopes to use this dark magic, and writes that when the spell is completed 9 times, it will be perfected, and when he's mastered this magic, you will whore yourself before me. Jesus, Domon. We'll find out who he wants whoring themselves out to him later on. After this, there's suddenly a man in yellow standing in the room with Utsuki, and it sounds like she yells that she's going to kill him. So, like anybody in such a situation, he runs away screaming. We find him again later on, and he appears to be injured since he stays on the ground during the fight that ensues, and he looks scared of her in the cutscene. Utsuki takes him out, and when she picks up his sacred cloth, the text mentions that his name is Dokai. Again, we'll come back to this later. One final journal can be found on the shrine grounds, and this one belongs to Kureha. Kureha writes about falling off of a cliff and thinking that she was dead. But when she wakes up, she's perfectly fine. Except, for the fact that she's woken up in a wicker chest. She feels tired and weak, and Utsuki is worried about her. But Kureha puts on her best big sister face for her little sibling. She next meets the twins, who tell her to sleep in a wicker chest with silkworms for a night. This makes her feel better the next morning, so she believes that the twins are manifestations of the mulberry god. Soon after, though, her fatigue returns, and the twins tell her to enter the wicker chest again, which they now call a cocoon. They put a rat in with her for the second round, and she's in a hurry to perform the ritual again because her limbs are beginning to rot, and she also starts to feel envious of Utsuki's healthy body. Kureha mentions the twins to her father, and he tells her about the ritual involving resurrection and cocoons. He says that a revived corpse will begin to rot, so it needs to be fused 9 times with increasingly larger creatures. The next time Kureha awakens inside the wicker chest, she has a revelation that her sister Utsuki pushed her off the cliff, and again wishes for her healthy skin. After reading that entry, Utsuki kind of checks out mentally, and says she had no choice, while grabbing a writing utensil off the desk. When she looks at the diary again, there's a new entry. It reads, "Today I killed Utsuki. Her body will soon merge with mine." After leaving the house, Utsuki runs into one of the twins. The other is on the ground, dead and burnt to a crisp. The still living twin holds onto the charred corpse's hand. The mulberry tree on the shrine grounds has also been burnt down, and as she approaches it, Utsuki turns into Kureha for just a moment. A flashback then occurs, showing us the day that Kureha fell from the cliff. Utsuki holds one end of a rope ladder as Kureha clings to the other, but the twins show up and surprise Utsuki, causing her to let go, and Kureha falls. Coming out of the memory, Utsuki says that Utsuki killed me, and jumps from the cliff as well. Strangely, this does nothing. Utsuki wakes up at the base of the cliff without a scratch on her. She then follows a blood trail to a cave entrance and goes back into the underground passageways. In a place called the Dream Chamber, Utsuki finds a bloody pool filled with tainted vessels that have been sailed away carrying sin. Maybe this is the end result of the cleansing ritual. Faces appear from the rocks, and voices from the past shout out lines from different scenes we've experienced. There's also a pool of blood that begins expanding from the center of the room. If you step into it, you're dragged down, and it's game over. Very reminiscent of the hospital room trap in Silent Hill 3, actually. Utsuki finds the living twin again, still holding on to the dead one. He tells Utsuki that they won't have to wait much longer for the rebirth, and that she is their beloved child. Utsuki also finds another volume of Domon's book, which reveals that entering a cocoon 9 times does not actually revive the dead. After the 9th merging, the dead are in fact reborn as mulberries, and the spell was always intended for silkworms, not humans. Afterwards, Domon appears. He also refers to Utsuki as Kureha, and tells her that it was the twins who killed her, and not Utsuki. He mocks her for not believing her sister, then pieces out. Father of the year right here. There's one last note from Domon to be found. This one says that Kureha's assimilation has advanced, and soon the Kuon spell will be complete. Ooh, that's the name of the game. He's also excited to encounter someone named Seimei. The room where you find this note also has a bunch of puppets that can be manipulated by silk, probably significant. At last, Utsuki finds the twin again, who follows her through this room, dragging their dead counterpart behind them. We see that Utsuki/Kureha is rotting and needs to merge with someone. At this time, Sakuya appears, and Utsuki reaches out for her through the fence.
そなたの姉はもう月助けてお願いやめてくれ月
Yeah, so that's one half of the story, but we've still got a whole other side to see, from Sakuya's point of view. This will be a bit quicker, because especially in the first half of the playthrough, there's a lot of the same ground covered. But we'll also see some questions answered, and get a bit of clarity on other aspects of the story. So let's check out the Yang phase. As Sakuya investigates the manor, she finds notes lying around saying that Abe no Seimei, the person Domon mentioned in his note near the end of Utsuki's scenario, ordered one of her disciples to find out what's going down at the Fujiwaras. Seimei is interested in the metal spikes that were supposed to be driven into the mulberry trees, but the disciple found out that these are missing. Another letter also mentions the rogue Onmyoji Domon, who boasts of his powers, but has strayed from the true path. Just like Utsuki, Sakuya finds Princess Ayako and must ring the bell to get her to open the doors to her room. This involves fighting Lord Fujiwara the same way that Utsuki did, and Ayako is abducted by Kureha in the same way. Also, remember those bodies that I mentioned earlier in the video that kept being moved around in Utsuki's scenario? Well, turns out that Dochin, the youngest and most inexperienced Onmyoji, has been the one moving them, using them as bait to distract the Gaki and other demons so he can sneak around the manor without being seen by them. Little bit. When Sakuya opens the shrine by using the wooden spikes and discs, she finds a note written by the servant boy Miyoshimaru on a leaf. In it, he writes that he saw Lady Fujiwara eat her own son. Soon after, Sakuya discovers Lady Fujiwara's diary, where she writes about taking the sick people to the temple and ordering it sealed to contain the spread of the disease. She stayed inside as well, and awakens one day inside a wicker chest with a centipede. Since we've already learned that the ritual starts with a silkworm and needs progressively larger creatures as it continues, she's already at least a few phases into it, and already dead. In another diary of hers, found within the temple, she writes about her desire to eat humans. And this is also where things get a bit weird, which I'm fairly certain is down to a translation error. She writes about Miyoshimaru coming to visit her, and she calls him her sweet child, who must have come because he was worried about his starving mother. But we know that Miyoshimaru is just a servant boy who the Fujiwara's son befriended. Miyoshimaru's note earlier also mentioned him witnessing Lady Fujiwara eating her own son. On top of that, we learn that Miyoshimaru created the first sacred cloths that could break the silk seals on the manor by using his own blood, and that one of the other people who lived or worked at the manor wanted to get some of Miyoshimaru's blood to make their own sacred seal to escape. So Miyoshimaru was either killed by another person at the manor, or succumbed to the sickness that the rest of the people had contracted. So yeah, I think the translators just messed up here and confused Miyoshimaru with the Fujiwara prince, since he's never given a name in the game. It would be interesting to check these notes against a Japanese version, but I don't have access to that. And unfortunately, there are a lot of typos and small errors in Kuon's English translation, so this seems to be the most likely explanation for these mixed up details. But anyway, the takeaway here, Lady Fujiwara has gone off the deep end. Sakuya also finds the priest of the temple, like Utsuki, but he's still alive and well, and the room is not completely overrun with silk threads, so this scene must have taken place before Utsuki found her way into the temple. The twins open the passageway beneath the temple for Sakuya and urge her to go down, and yeah, sure thing, creepy twins. Down here, she finds a note from a dead Onmyoji who says the twins tricked him and that Lady Fujiwara is down here, so Sakuya hightails it out of there. But as she's about to reach the steps again, Dochin comes running, screaming for help, before being grabbed by something and dragged back upstairs. After exiting the underground passage herself, Sakuya watches as Lady Fujiwara stuffs Dochin's dead body into a wicker chest. She then transforms into a centipede-like creature, and Sakuya needs to deal with her. After killing Lady Fujiwara, Sakuya finds a note on Dochin, talking about the west entrance of the manor, which leads to a mountain path and a shrine nearby. So Sakuya leaves the temple and heads for the west gate. Outside the manor, she finds her brother Doryo, with both Utsuki and Kureha. Hold up, we didn't play this part of the game in Utsuki's scenario. Well, again, Bear with me, and we'll analyze this at the end. Utsuki explains that she and her sister have never seen the outside world, except for this forsaken path between the shrine where they live and the Fujiwara Manor. So, Sakuya cockblocks her brother and accompanies this trio up the mountain path. Along the way, she fights some giant monkeys and a freaking yeti. When Sakuya reaches the top of the path, she finds Kureha and Doryo getting friendly underneath the mulberry tree, and Doryo has a silkworm in his hand. Utsuki goes all goofy and says something about how she must be having a long, long dream.
眉の中の虫は一体何を考えているのでしょうか。私思うのです。きっととても長い夢を見ているのだと。
Doryo is clearly put off that Sakuya has made her way up the mountain and tells her to go take care of a gaki that followed her, while he stays here with the sisters. That boy's thirsty. Sakuya goes off to investigate the shrine grounds and finds diaries from Utsuki and Kureha, as well as some writings from Domon concerning his studies of silkworms. On her way through one area of the house, she catches a glimpse of Kureha and Utsuki arguing outside, while Doryo's dead body is next to the mulberry tree.
同じ思いを。姉様、おやめください。お願いです、姉様。おやめください。姉様。Utsuki、あの日、あなたは私のことを殺した。ここから突き落として。
As Sakuya tries to find a way around back to the mulberry tree again, she runs into Dokai inside the temple grounds. He's clearly already dead and wants to merge with Sakuya. She fights him, and unlike when Utsuki faces him, he can move around during the battle. Sakuya takes him out anyway and finds her way back to the mulberry tree. There's no sign of Kureha or Doryo, but there is a trail of blood leading to a wicker chest with a dark aura emanating from it. Checking the chest reveals a half-merged Kureha and Doryo. Now, this leads to a boss fight, but funnily enough, I found out that you can just run away and leave the area. And if you do this, you can return, and the boss will have disappeared, allowing you to grab the sacred cloth you need from the chest. And that's it. This boss never returns, and we never see it again. Weird. While she was wandering around the shrine area, Sakuya found a wooden handle, which she now uses to close the floodgates, allowing her to find a mirror that she'll need to open a cave entrance. But while turning the floodgates, a clearly pissed off Kureha is standing on the other side of the stream watching her. Hey, what's going on? When Sakuya returns from grabbing the mirror, Kureha attacks. You can knock her out, but it's just a waste of resources. You can easily avoid her, and she doesn't even chase you between screens, so oh well. Sakuya burns down the mulberry tree on the shrine grounds and descends the cliff. She then uses the mirror to enter the caves. While down there, Sakuya runs into one of the twins, who's pissed that Sakuya had burned down the tree and killed the other twin. She also finds Domon, who reveals that he summoned his disciples, Sakuya, Doryo, Dokai, and Dochin, to the manor as sacrifices for the Kuon spell. Sakuya tries to attack him, but she's no match, and he knocks her on her ass. Afterwards, the remaining twin sicks Kureha on Sakuya, and all she can do is run. At this point, she finds Utsuki near the fence, rotting away, just like in the end of the Yin scenario, and we see the same cutscene as the first time round, with no further resolution. However, when we return from saving our game, a third character has appeared on the character select screen, and we can enter the final chapter of the story, the Kuon phase. As soon as we begin this scenario, we see the resolution to the previous cutscene. Utsuki regains control of herself momentarily, and Sakuya leaves to find a way to help her. Meanwhile, outside the manor, we see a demon-like creature watching from a rooftop as a new figure enters.
確かに匂うな。あやつはそこにおるのか?
Oh, but this dude is actually on her side. Demon Boy. So this is Abe no Seimei, the rival of Domon and a master onmyoji. This is the person who Domon wants to make whore herself out to him once he completes the Kuon ritual. Too bad for Domon. Seimei is a badass. She carries a ceremonial spear for a melee weapon, along with the most powerful spell and summon cards. She's a walking force of destruction, and you can cut down normal enemies with no problem with her strong and quick melee slashes. Her scenario is the shortest of the three, only taking about 45 minutes or so to get through, but it also provides closure to the whole saga here. Seimei explores the manor, much like the other two characters, but her path is way more linear, with many areas blocked off, and even though she's a super powerful onmyoji who's going to kick Domon's ass, she's still no match for her greatest nemesis, walking over knee-high obstacles. Seimei also finds more of Domon's books lying around, detailing his plans to seal the twins and use their powers. According to him, they're so powerful that only fire can kill them. Though Sakuya already found that out. Domon also fears Seimei because he knows she's the only one powerful enough to defeat him. At the mulberry tree on the manor grounds, you'll hear only one of the twins singing in the background, since the other is already dead, which is a brilliant touch in terms of sound design. Sakuya, beaten and bloodied, is at the mercy of this single twin. However, it turns and notices Seimei's presence. The twin attempts an attack, but gets smacked the fuck down. Seimei stabs a couple of metal spikes into the mulberry tree, sealing the twin in place. She then notices Sakuya and recognizes her as one of Domon's disciples. Sakuya begs Seimei to help Utsuki, and Seimei says she'll see what she can do. She also says she's going to need more spikes to seal the twin away for good. Entering the underground, Seimei finds her way to a room with hanging corpses that both Utsuki and Sakuya pass through in their phases. Now all the bodies are burning. Utsuki is here with her final Saiga wolf summon and explains that she burned the bodies to stop her cravings for flesh.
死人どもにも火をつけてしまいました。
察するに不和を封じれば良さそうだ。運が良ければ間に合うかもしれぬ。まあ釘がなくては拉致が開かぬがな。
私はここで朽ちるつもりです。
それはそなたの勝手だが、実の娘まで逃げとするなどはさすがに戯れが過ぎると思わぬか。そなたの父、滅するがよいな。
After leaving her, Seimei finds another of Domon's books where he explains that he never had any desire to use the Kuon ritual for eternal youth or immortality. He basically just wanted to pull off a powerful spell and seal the twins' power so he could use it for his own. This he knew would draw out Abe no Seimei, and then he would finally be able to kill her. In his words, what greater pleasure is there in this world than to battle with one's mortal enemy and emerge victorious? So all of this shit, studying the ritual, removing the spikes, having Kureha kill all these people and go through the phases of resurrection, it was all a ploy to draw out Seimei and make himself more powerful than her. What a dick. After finding 9 more spikes down here, I think that'll do for sealing the twin, eh? Seimei finally meets up with Domon in his lab area. He hasn't completed the ritual yet and taken the twin's power, but he still tries his hand at taking down Seimei. After a final showdown in this burning arena, where I summoned my demon boys, the Zenki, and used powerful homing fire spells, Domon goes down. Before Seimei can do anything though, Utsuki appears and grabs her father's body, dragging it away upstairs. Out in the garden, Sakuya tries to stop Utsuki from stuffing Domon's body into the wicker chest, but she doesn't have the strength, and Utsuki just backhands her, before diving into the chest with her father's corpse. The remaining twin seems to be enjoying all of this, until Seimei stabs more spikes into the tree, finally sealing it for good. She goes to destroy the wicker chest as well, but Sakuya stops her, begging her not to kill Utsuki. Intrigued by Sakuya's pleas, she gives her the rest of the metal spikes and tells Sakuya that whatever is born from that chest is her responsibility now. Then Seimei leaves, her work finished. The final cutscene shows a bright morning, with Sakuya standing outside the manor. She beckons a small girl outside, who looks strikingly similar to Utsuki. Sakuya says that she's free to finally leave the manor now, and they walk off together into the morning light. And that's the end. A surprisingly uplifting ending, considering everything that came before it. But okay, what about all the inconsistencies in the story, especially between the yin and yang phases? Well, it's time for some story analysis. Kuon's story is complex, with lots of small details in both the cutscenes as well as in the notes and journals left around the game world. There are also many plot points that are intentionally left vague or unanswered, so my analysis here is only one person's interpretation. I haven't watched anyone else's videos on Kuon, so I have no idea what others have said about it. So I don't know if I'm being derivative of anyone else, but these are just my thoughts from playing it on my own. I've stuck strictly to information found in the game and the manual, though the manual's not really much help. It's very brief. If you've played the game and have different thoughts on what's going on here, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. But anyway, first off, we know that Kureha is already dead at the start of the game. The incident at the cliff where Kureha fell and died, supposedly for the first time, took place before Doman left on his own investigation of the manor. At the point when the story begins, Kureha has already gone through at least a few cycles of the resurrection. This is according to her diary that we find near the end of the game, and the entry dates go through almost a full year. There's also the opening cutscene where she kills Lord Fujiwara, which happened at least a month before the Omyoji team arrived, according to their dialogue in the beginning of the Yang phase. And as we know, as you go through the 9 cycles of the resurrection, you need larger and larger creatures to maintain the resurrected body. We also know, almost for certain, that the events in the Yang phase, Sakuya's scenario, take place before the Yin phase, Utsuki's scenario. There are several clues for this. First off, the rope that Dochin tied to the dead body at the temple to allow Sakuya to climb up from the underground is already there in Utsuki's story. One of the disciples that arrived with the Omyoji team, Dokai, is already injured by the time Utsuki encounters him near her home, so we can assume he already fought Sakuya. But probably the biggest marker is the mulberry tree on the shrine grounds, which is already burnt with one of the twins dead during Utsuki's scenario, and this is an act that Sakuya performed. There are some incongruities though, and these mostly all appear in the manor portion of the playthrough. Firstly, Sakuya and Utsuki's meeting near the mulberry tree. They both experience that encounter. Both of them also run into Princess Ayako and watch her lock herself in her room. Both of them find the bell and fight Lord Fujiwara, and both of them ring the bell and watch as Ayako is abducted by Kureha. There are also all the seals around the manor still being on the doors, and the fact that both characters need to find the wooden discs and spikes to open the shrine passageway, plus another couple of puzzles and items scattered throughout the manor. Now, like I said way back in the beginning of the video, you could chalk all this up to the fact that it's just a video game. And sure, there are some things that are just that. Mostly the more gameplay specific things like locked doors and puzzles. But considering the attention to detail in other aspects of the game, I think there's a bit more to the repeated story segments. During the Yin phase, in the caves, after Utsuki witnesses her own body dropped on top of a wicker chest while peering through a crack in the wall, she encounters the twins. They tell her, if you enter a cocoon, you'll return to where you were. And as they help Utsuki inside a wicker chest, they say that the people in the cocoons merge into one and have a long, long dream. After this scene, Utsuki wakes up near the Torii Gate waterfall, and there's a wicker chest nearby. So what I believe is that everything from the beginning of the game up until the point where Utsuki emerges from this wicker chest was part of the long, long dream that Utsuki experienced while in the wicker chest merging with Kureha. She still has her own memories, and Kureha's now, if she's merged with her sister, and this is what informs the early parts of the game. That's why she repeats the same things that Sakuya does in the Yang phase. We know that Kureha was already at the manor before this because she killed Lord Fujiwara, so she could have seen many of these events. She was in the room with Ayako when she ran and hid when Sakuya first arrived. Also, after Sakuya kills Lord Fujiwara, something bursts from his neck, and that thing looks an awful lot like Kureha. And yeah, we know she merged with him. Also, when Utsuki sees Dokai inside the shrine, she shouts that she's going to kill him, and he runs from her. He also seems scared in the cutscene preceding the boss fight, so he probably sees Utsuki as Kureha, the one who most likely killed him. After the fight, the flavor text says that there's a cloth found on Dokai. How would Utsuki have known his name if she'd never met him before? The subtitle for the Yin phase is also Chapter of Shadow in the kanji on the character select screen, while the Yang phase is subtitled Chapter of Light. This could maybe indicate that at least portions of Utsuki's story are just memories or dreams, shadows if you will, and Sakuya's scenario takes place in reality. But in any case, the question is, when did Utsuki die? Well, about halfway through the Yang phase, there's the part where Sakuya accompanies her brother, Utsuki, and Kureha up the mountain path, an event that you don't experience while playing as Utsuki. And later on, Sakuya witnesses Kureha push Utsuki off of the cliff. So my guess is that Utsuki was still alive before this happened, and Kureha pushes her off the cliff and finally kills her in this moment. Also, after Utsuki emerges from the wicker chest and searches her home, she finds Kureha's diary, and after reading it, a cutscene occurs where Utsuki is speaking as if she is Kureha. She also picks up a writing utensil, and if you check the diary again, there's a new entry that reads, "Today I killed Utsuki. Her body will soon merge with mine." If this is the case, we can also pinpoint the day the game takes place, May 7th. Neat! Also, in Lady Fujiwara's diary, she's concerned for the people who become diseased and for her own children. But toward the end, she thinks her son has come to visit her so she can eat him, which she does. The fuck does that have to do with anything? I don't know what the fuck that Lady Fujiwara part has to do with anything. I think I put that in the wrong spot of the script. This is a long one. Going back to the story though, one thing that doesn't add up here is why does Utsuki not take any damage when she jumps off the cliff after finding the burnt mulberry tree and witnessing the memory of the day Kureha died? Well, I honestly don't know. You got me there. She wakes up at the bottom of the cliff just fine, but the rope ladders are already pulled down because Sakuya did that after she descended to this area in her scenario. So yeah, I have no idea. But then again, we've seen how durable these merged creatures are, so maybe she's just powerful enough to survive a fall like that now. I don't know. In any case, from the moment she woke up near the Tori waterfall, we are actually playing as Kureha and Utsuki merged. This is further reinforced when you meet Domon in the caves, and he speaks to Utsuki as if she is Kureha. Now here's a bit I'm not clear on. From the notes that people who have merged leave behind, they wake up with the dead thing still with them in the wicker chest. Yet Kureha appears from within Lord Fujiwara. And also, Sakuya interrupts the merge between her brother Doryo and Kureha, which unleashes this monstrous hybrid. And Lady Fujiwara is crossed with a centipede, though she says that she woke up in the wicker chest with a dead centipede. So, yeah, I'm not totally clear on the details of what goes on in those wicker chests, or if the two beings merge and then split again at some point. While we're playing as Utsuki/Kureha, wandering through the caves at the end, the twins sick Kureha on Sakuya, and as she runs away, she meets up with Utsuki, and the final cutscene of the yin and yang phase plays. And this must be happening at the same time, right? So maybe the dead thing in the wicker chest also comes to life? That would explain why some beings like Lord Fujiwara and the evil Kureha that chases Sakuya have purple auras around them, possibly, but I'm not sure on these points. Also, this must be Kureha's 8th merge, because at the end of the Kuon phase, after Seimei kills Domon, Utsuki, or, Kureha, depending on how you want to look at it, grabs his body and performs the ritual a final time, emerging as a new being, this young girl at the end. She looks like a young Utsuki, but she may be something else entirely now that the Kuon ritual is finally complete. One of Domon's books say that this is a ritual meant for silkworms, so maybe this new creature is something like the twins? Would that mean that there's another mulberry tree somewhere on the grounds now? I don't know. We don't have any solid evidence on anything about that. But yeah, that's my best stab at trying to figure out what's going on here. I'm sure there are others out there that have a different take. Again, it would be cool to discuss it in the comments section. There are also other aspects of the story that I didn't mention, like the cocoons birthing the Gaki, which I think is just like a preparatory phase for the Kuon ritual. They need the Gaki for maybe the first humanoid phase of the resurrection process. The diseased people as well, and the origin of the disease itself. Possibly these are the dead beings that emerged from the wicker chest after whoever was attempting the ritual left the chest already. We know that a lot of people tried to attempt this ritual once they found out about it. And also, who the hell is this woman sitting next to the man dressed in yellow that you encounter on the beach area beyond the pavilion? She just kind of stands up and fades into darkness after the man notices you and attacks. It's really creepy. I don't think you ever see her again. But the biggest plot hole of them all is this one I mentioned way earlier. Utsuki, supposedly in her dream if you want to follow along with this theory, falls through the floor in the pavilion area, but the hole is already there when Sakuya arrives. So what the hell? If Sakuya arrived before Utsuki, why is it here? My theory is that this happened to Kureha as she was roaming the manor, collecting bodies for the phases of the ritual. Or it could be when Utsuki first arrived at the manor and she was still alive, before she met up with Sakuya, Kureha, and Doryo heading to the mountain path. Either way, it's a memory that Utsuki has from either herself or Kureha while she's in her dream, and that would explain why it's already there when Sakuya arrives. It's either that or just something the devs missed while designing the game. But yeah, goddamn this hole, because it really tripped me up at first as I was trying to work out the timeline of this story. Kuon is a master class in horror design. It's an intriguing setting, dripping with a foreboding atmosphere, and it also contains an intricate storyline that leaves a lot up to interpretation. The sound and art design are excellent, and while the combat is a sticking point due to the fact that the enemies are spongy and annoying to deal with, but also never feel like much of a threat to your character due to a generous grappling, or maybe struggling mechanic would be a better way to put it, and you also have the ability to heal yourself to full and safe locations by meditating. All in all, it makes for an overly forgiving and unbalanced combat experience. But the rest of the game is so well done that even with this blemish, it's easy to forgive Kuon and become entangled in its dark, folklore-inspired horror. And that is it. Oh my god, this video was a lot. So much to talk about with the gameplay and the story, but I'm so glad I played this. When I first started, I didn't expect it to grab hold of me like it did, but here we are at the end of an hour-plus video on Kuon. I'd like to give a special thanks to some of the people who go above and beyond to support this channel on Patreon, and now through YouTube memberships as well. If you'd like to join them, you can click the Patreon link in the description below, or you can hit the join button on this video page. All tiers get to watch videos a day or two before they're public on YouTube, and they also get access to exclusive posts and updates from me. If you donate at the $5 tiers or higher, you also get your names read out loud, like these dungeon architects: Benifer 94, Caleb, Izzy Lexus, Mr. Sunshine Jr., and Nekat the Brave. As well as these dungeon connoisseurs: Crippler Jones, Dazed Clockwork, Dika, Goats and Goblins, Joshua Weber, Mr. Independent, Old Dead Lemons, True Axiom, Warrior Song, Where Am I? Help, and Zach Diedrich. Thank you all for your support, and thank you for watching. I have one more Halloween video planned, and I guarantee that nobody will guess what it is. Go on and try in the comments. I dare you. You won't get it. If you do, I don't know, I'll shit my pants. I mean, probably, because I just don't think anyone is going to guess what it is. But yeah, I'm getting a bit loopy here, sitting recording this voiceover for almost 2 hours, so I'm going to sign off. Kuon, check it out. Dungeon Chill, out.